We have all seen the headlines about Mahmoud Khalil's immigration case. Judge rules that Colombia activists can be deported. People are rightfully outraged and certainly scared, protesting today across New York City, questioning what this means not only for Khalil, but for immigrants and for those speaking out for Palestinians and for anyone who challenges Donald Trump's policies. They have the right to feel this way, given the case against Khalil is built on a flimsy two-page memo. Instead of providing actual evidence, Secretary of State Marco Rubio wrote that Khalil can be deported not only over his current beliefs, but even his future beliefs, whatever that means. Rubio claims, while calling his beliefs and activities lawful, that Khalil's presence in the U.S. would somehow compromise a compelling U.S. foreign policy interest. Why? Well, because of Khalil's alleged role in, quote, anti-Semitic protests and disruptive activities that supposedly made Jewish students feel unsafe in a hostile environment. It doesn't cite any laws that Mahmoud Khalil actually broke. That's because, to our knowledge, so far, Khalil has not broken any laws. And as far as that hostile environment claim, take an actual listen to what Khalil said to CNN nearly 1 year ago when it comes to the issue of anti-Semitism on Columbia University's campus.
Once again, I would say that the liberation of Palestine and the Palestinians and the Jewish people are intertwined. They go hand in hand. Anti-Semitism and any other form of racism has no place on this campus and in this movement.
Now, if the Trump administration actually cared about the safety of Jews in this country, maybe it shouldn't have pardoned January 6 rioters who actually broke the law and stormed our Capitol. Instead, Trump pardoned one rioter who wore a Camp Auschwitz sweatshirt on the day of the insurrection. Someone else he pardoned is a known neo-Nazi who once told his co-workers that, quote, Hitler should have finished the job. And there are hundreds more with similar views who stormed Capitol Hill. There are hundreds more who prove they are an actual threat to this country. So let's not pretend this is about protecting Jewish students. It's about silencing dissent and weaponizing immigration laws to do just that. Friday's ruling, in my eyes, was specifically about manipulating immigration law, and I think more headlines should have looked like this one. Immigration judge rules Khalil can be deported, but legal hurdles remain, or Mahmoud Khalil's battle is not over. And despite what Secretary Rubio and the rest of the Trump administration want you to believe, Mahmoud Khalil's case is indeed far from over. First off, for those following closely, especially in the legal world, Friday's deportation ruling was no surprise. In fact, some speculate that's why the administration moved him all the way to Louisiana, far away from his family, or where he'd land before a Fifth Circuit judge, arguably the most conservative in the country. Keep in mind, Columbia University is in New York, not in Louisiana. Khalil's legal team now has until April 23rd to file for relief, and that's not a quick process, and it could actually stretch out longer than the Trump administration would prefer. There's something else here that they probably don't want you paying attention to, which is that Khalil still has another case, a federal habeas corpus case in New Jersey. That case isn't actually about immigration law. It's about the Constitution and whether Khalil is being treated fairly under the law. It challenges the legality of Khalil's detention and the way the government is going about this deportation, because his First Amendment rights appear to have been violated. His transfer to Louisiana appears to be no accident, and the government tried to revoke his green card without any warning. And his team maintains throughout it all that Khalil has been denied his most basic rights. In fact, back in March, the judge in this specific case made clear that Khalil cannot be deported unless he says so. Rubio's out there already calling this a win. And yes, the immigration ruling sets a horrible precedent, one that's akin to authoritarian rule. But the habeas case still has real weight, and it is in front of a federal judge that might rule more favorably. Devastatingly, this means that Mahmoud Khalil will likely miss the birth of his first child. But despite some headlines, this administration hasn't sealed his fate yet. Joining me now, back on the program, Ramzi Qasim, an attorney for Mahmoud Khalil. Ramzi is also a professor at the CUNY School of Law. right here in New York City. He is also the co-director of the CLEAR program there. Ramzi, thanks so much for coming back. I know it has been a crazy week for you, and I suspect something that we will see ups and downs and a lot of activity. But walk us through the latest update and put in context for us what the development of this decision on Friday by an immigration judge means.
Well, the important thing to keep in mind about any decision by any immigration judge, and this is the reason why, as you pointed out, Ayman, the government went to great pains to, in the dead of night, move Mr. Khalil away from his family, away from his home, whisk him away to a detention facility in Louisiana. Now, of course, they prefer the Fifth Circuit, as you said. But an immigration judge is essentially a functionary. That person is a DOJ, Department of Justice employee who serves at the pleasure of the president. It is not an independent judge. That person is an at-will employee who is subject to political pressures. And you have to keep in mind the larger context where President Trump fired half of the Board of Immigration Appeals in February, all of the Biden appointees, and a third of the immigration judges earlier. And so, of course, that is the context we're walking into. The government wants to speed up the immigration case because that is a case in a court that it controls, heard before a judge who's not really a judge, whose outcomes they can sort of predetermine. And they want to slow down as much as possible Mr. Khalil's federal habeas corpus case that asserts his constitutional challenge to the legality of his detention. This case is about speech. The government has made no secret of it. It's because Mr. Khalil espouses pro-Palestinian viewpoints in defense of Palestinian rights and lives that he is being retaliated against. And we intend to vindicate his constitutional rights in federal court as soon as we can.
Just to be clear, there is no scenario right now in which Mahmoud Khalil can be deported. Is that correct?
Right.
Even though this decision came out, they couldn't just do something like what they did with the El Salvadorian prison transfers, where they just suddenly took these people out, even though there is a judge who's saying, wait a minute, when was this order given? Why are these people in El Salvador? Bring them back.
They should not, because the typical run of things, even in immigration cases, even though it's an administrative court, is that the next stage is relief. He gets to assert his claims for relief, whether it's asylum or something else, and that's the normal process of things. Plus, as you also rightly mentioned, the federal court has an effective order barring his removal from the United States, the federal court in New Jersey.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about this habeas case. Bring us up to speed on the proceedings taking place there. When can we expect any movement in one way or the other on it?
Well, the judge in the federal case in New Jersey called us into court for a telephonic status conference right after the conclusion of the immigration hearing in Louisiana yesterday. He wanted an update on what happened in court. And before him are a number of motions having to do with Mr. Khalil's constitutional rights. One is a motion for Mr. Khalil's release immediately on bail. There's another motion to compel the government to bring him back to New Jersey, even if it's an ICE detention in New Jersey, to bring him back within the jurisdiction of the federal court. And then we have a longer sort of term motion for a preliminary injunction to bar them from continuing with this entire sham process. The bottom line here, again, is that this is about the First Amendment, it's about due process, and it's about Mr. Khalil's defense of Palestinian rights, which should be celebrated and not punished.
So let's talk about that and some of the evidence that has, or lack of evidence, I should say, that has certainly been presented to the public. I don't know if the government has evidence that they have not submitted, but let's talk about what I highlighted there in that introduction. Marco Rubio zeroing in on foreign students who are visa holders, but then when asked to provide some kind of evidence or documentation that they violated any laws or in what way they actually contributed to the reshaping of American foreign policy or posing a national security threat, it falls on beliefs and even possibly future beliefs.
And that is the...
It's like an episode of Minority Report here.
And that's the point. The point is to make this extreme assertion of executive power and to see if they can get away with it. And so Marco Rubio issues this 2-page memo with no supporting documentation that was filed with the immigration court. That memo has 2 names on it, both of whom happen to be my clients and my organization's clients. So that's Mahmoud Khalil and Yoon So Chung. And Marco Rubio then makes the remarkable assertion that because of their speech, because of what they've said or what they've done in protest, the fact that they participated in protests at all or spoke out in defense of Palestinians, that somehow causes a foreign policy concern. And then because of his say-so, they should be removed and stripped of their permanent residency. Both of them are green card holders. They're U.S. permanent residents by law. They're considered U.S. persons. Yeah. And so the point is to do something that's really extreme and outrageous and see if they can get away with it. And that's the entire reason why we have to draw a line collectively and make sure that they don't get away with it, because the precedent this will set will enable them to go after any other set of people who espouse any set of viewpoints that they disagree with. So we have to make sure that we defeat this template here in court today as soon as possible, so that it doesn't go any further, because it's not just about Mahmoud Khalil or Yoon Seo-chung, it's about the rights of all Americans.
Yeah, it starts with the Palestinian rights and it will evolve from there into other areas, but by then it'll be too late. A precedent will have been set. When do you expect, or how do you expect this to be adjudicated over the course of the next, I mean, is there any chance that he could be released for the birth of his child?
We remain hopeful. We are, of course, concerned, as is he, as is his spouse. Time is running out. She's due this month. Yeah. But the federal court in New Jersey has been treating this case with the urgency that it deserves, and we're hoping for a prompt outcome there.
You know, you probably saw tonight the Trump administration finally provided details on Kilmar Abrego Garcia's whereabouts. And I'm curious to get your thoughts. This is the Maryland father who was wrongfully deported to El Salvador. They confirmed he's alive. They confirmed that he's in this notorious prison in El Salvador, CTOC. When you look at these two cases, different circumstances, different outcomes so far, but what is the underlying approach that this administration you think is trying to adopt to people in this country?
Well, it's another radical assertion of executive power, because you have to remember that Mr. Kilmar Garcia also had the protection. He was legally present in the United States. He had been granted a withholding of removal. He was not supposed to be taken out of the country by law, just as a U.S. permanent resident is not supposed to be taken out of the country. And so the fact that the Supreme Court said, well, you have to facilitate his return to the United States, that was a huge defeat for the Trump administration. And we are hoping that in Mr. Mahmoud Khalil's case and Ms. Yoon Seo-chung's case and all the other cases that we're handling, that we can hand them another defeat in the courts.
Really quickly, is there any scenario in which you can go straight to the Supreme Court, making the case that, you know, his wife is pregnant, she has a couple of weeks to give birth, this is going to be delayed, the government is trying to delay this, we've seen this tactic before used by Trump in other legal cases, you want a decision quickly?
Well, that may be procedurally complicated for us to do, but we're certainly making the points that you've just highlighted, which is this is all about delaying the federal case. They will play every jurisdictional game to delay that and move their immigration court case faster. And so, again, our hope and our aim is to get Mr. Mahmoud Khalil back home to his family as soon as possible and to fight the immigration case from here.
All right, Ramzi Qasim, it's great to see you again. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciate it.